All right, it is 5:30, so we can go ahead and get started. My name is Brianna. I am with the Houston I-O Psychology Network. Hannah, Dion, and I are Dion and I are going to be hosting these calls. So we're just doing a series of Zoom panels with I/O professionals, just to help get the network going outside of Houston too, really just all over the US. I think we even have a couple speakers later on. I think one's from Australia. So maybe outside of the US as well. Um, but they're just going to be sharing their expertise. So we have Emmy, Melanie, and Kristen here. And they're going to take turns introducing themselves and giving kind of their background in I/O. So I will go ahead and let them take over.
All right, so I think I'm up first. Hi, everyone. Super excited to see some names and faces that I recognize already on here as well. And thank you, Brianna, as well, for just putting this together. I think this is needed in the community. So, very excited to be the first to share some information and also very excited to learn from my co-panelists today. I mentioned that earlier when we were all on. So, super happy to be here. So, I did put some slides together, and the intention here is to really just make sure that I speak to both the whole purpose of this, which is really to be a reflection of our I/O work in the world, right? And my roles have been non-traditional I/O roles in terms of the title. And so hope to really draw that bridge for those here between how I've used I/O in my workplace and really align those two. And also to really maybe inspire you if you're interested in I/O or to even see how I/O is maybe working in your world when you don't even know it. So this particular topic area is around org development. So some of it is centered around that. Can you see my screen? Awesome. Okay, cool. Let me go ahead and jump over. So I am, like I said, Dr. Emi, sometimes called Dr. B, sometimes called Dr. Emi. And so my particular full-time role right now is what we're calling a senior scrum master or senior project manager of business intelligence, kind of playing both roles on my team. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about what a scrum master even is in a different slide. Also, I'm the founder of HEARTH Team Leadership, which I'll also mention on a different slide. But I designed a leadership model for a human ethics approach or human centric approach to leadership when we're integrating technology in the workplace. So I'll share a little bit about that. And then I also write and speak in various places, popular press, mostly for the writing, and conferences, training, podcasts, things like that for the speaking piece of that. I want to just share the intersection of my career and education. So, from the undergraduate side, I double majored in psychology and organizational leadership and supervision, which I at the time thought were completely disparate. And then I got into the master's program for I/O psychology, and I saw actually there was a collision between the two. And then ultimately finished with my doctorate in strategic leadership, which is really my area of interest in the I/O or under the I/O umbrella, which is leadership and more specifically human centric leadership. So through my career, I've mostly worked in the technology sector as a PM or as a Scrum Master or any kind of things under that traditional project management or project focused arena. Mostly in the agility space, so a lot of throughout my positions and what you would see on my resume is agile focused in team and organizational development. I also work in the space of leadership training and education. I have designed that model and do tech ethics focused around that, and have publications on hr.com. This fall will be the Journal for Biblical Perspectives in Leadership, my first peer-reviewed piece, yay. And then a couple of books that are going to be hopefully out by the end of the year, a chapter in a book and then a collaborative piece. And then as academic service, I do peer review for Group and Organization Management Journal and the Journal of Information Communication and Ethics, which is, you'll see, one of the resounding themes in kind of what I do. So my specific areas of expertise would be virtual teams. I did list hybrid, but I would definitely say remote teaming is certainly the specialty, agility and framework. So mostly on the agile development side, processes, and the team dynamics that really go along with technology development. The leadership side, human centric, but also strategic, and taking theory or research to practice is really a big part of the work that I do in my day to day. From the technology side, have mostly focused around the development of technology, really across the board. I've touched lots of different kinds of tech, transformation or modernization. So depending on how far you need to go to get to the innovation side, and then the ethics around our technology in the workplace. I did this little visual, which is really, you can imagine me at the little intersection spot there. So the four areas that I just mentioned, I did put, I won't speak on all of these. You're all capable of reading, I'm sure. And so these are really some of the content areas for the intersection of those four areas of expertise. And then I outlined here really the I-O principles at play, or the foundation of the work that I do, which is primarily org development, leadership and team development, role design, and team dynamics. And so I say role and I don't say job because it is more on the role side. And then data informed change, which if you're working on doing research or that's a skill set you have, and you can really draw that into using analytics to and assessments for insights and in your workplace. And so I use that as one of the competencies that I do the work that I do with. And it's really an intersection of tech and I/O primarily for all of my career. And so I just want to touch on this concept of I/O being in conjunction with technology. Oftentimes, what we'll really think about in the tech sector, as it relates to I/O, is going to be just very few things. And if we think about all of the different ways that we can really use and apply I/O in the tech space or in technology integration, which touches every sector, every market, it's really kind of underneath the iceberg here. And so hopefully some of these insights and some of this information today will provide you, from my end, a scuba gear to get under the water and take a look at some of the underneath ice. So this lovely lady who looks curious like me is a senior Scrum Master, and that's what I do in my full-time role. So I did list out some kind of day-to-day responsibilities of what I'm doing in my day job. Most recently working for a Fortune 3, have worked for a Fortune 50 organization as well. You can see their names, and I'm not an official spokesperson for the organization, so I don't put their name out there or their names out there, but it's on my LinkedIn if you care. And I have just listed some of the industries that I work in. So during the day, I am working with the team, facilitating their work, helping remove impediments for them, coaching and training them in agility frameworks, and being a servant leader to the team. I think that's one of the critical parts of being a Scrum Master, is being a servant leader and helping them self-manage as a team of completely different backgrounds and roles, and sometimes countries. A lot of cases for me, they've been global teams. Serving as a change agent, and then also as a mentor wherever needed. And Scrum is a framework itself. So I do work doing project management and Scrum work. But if you're interested in Scrum, there's a lot of material out on the internet that can help teach you what it is. The HEARTH is the human ethics approach for remote and tech hybrid, a mouthful. Team leadership. It's the model that I designed that's supposed to be the intersection of technology and human-centric ethics. The 7-element competency-based model. And this, I have a book out there, the HEARTH theoretical construct book, if you will, and then training and courses that are associated with it, and ultimately culminates into a certificate program. Really working to launch this out in the world to get more and more folks using it, learning about it, and just understanding where those two intersect in absolutely every industry right now, especially as we move forward with AI and robotics and other modern technologies like surveillance. There really is the need for question and the ethics space around what people are doing and how we roll it out. There is a QR code to the website, but I have one on the last slide, so I am going to go ahead and pop by just in the interest of time. So look into the future of the things that I'm doing. So as mentioned, there's a couple of publications. This quarter, I am the visiting virtual expert for National University for their Center of Advancement of Virtual Organizations. And in their the release that's going to come out for their book on case studies in the virtual environment, I will have a chapter of a case study in there. And then there's a collaborative piece, hopefully going to be out by the end of the year, with a co-author on the concept of relational intelligence and leadership and in the workplace. My area is really focused on that future ready or future focus in that space. expanding the HEARTH team leadership model. So anyone who might be interested in that, please do check out the website and hopefully getting some expansion of that into the workplace, and then partnering with educational institutions and corporate America as well to really have an ethical focus on our technology integration. And for those of you that are in the Houston area, if you're interested in going to the PMI conference and learning a little bit more, I'll be speaking at the PMI conference this year. It'll be next month. And you can get PDUs for that for anyone who wants PDUs. And this is just a little, hopefully inspiration. This is me when I was 10 years old. And when I was 10, I wanted to be a writer, a doctor, a singer, and the very first woman president. And I am okay with 3 out of 4. So I am wanting to hopefully inspire you to dream big. So take your I/O love or take your I/O education or where you're in the middle of it and dream big. I just listed some of the things that are org development or I/O related that I use in my every single day life, whether it is in my full-time job or I use it in all of the passion work that I do related to technology. I mean, you can see there are many different things that you can do in the I/O sector and apply them in your day-to-day work and your day-to-day life. It doesn't have to be a traditional title, and mine certainly is not and never has been I/O really anything, but I apply it all over the place. So this is really just an offer and hopefully an inspiration to really dream big about with what you could do in the I/O space. And with that, I will say thanks. Oh, there's a little thanks there. There it is. Okay. So thanks for that. And I'll just leave this up for one moment. Want to connect with me on LinkedIn? My information is under my name. I think I may be the only Emi Barresi out there on LinkedIn. And then the website is hearth-teamleadership.com. And you can certainly find a lot more information about the leadership model and some ways that that's getting out in the world.
I mean, that was awesome. And I feel like I have similar messages too. So we might have a continuous theme. So, hi, everyone. My name is Melanie. Here to talk about my I/O journey. I do work for Lenovo currently, and they are happy for me to represent them. So therefore, they have nice, pretty slide decks that I just use sometimes. So there we go. Here's a little bit about me. You know, it's funny. I did a presentation for interns the other day, and I was like, you know what, different audience today, but I'm going to keep the slide because I think we're all human, and every now and then it's going to learn fun facts about each other. So I've included them here too. So my background is in I/O psychology through and through. I don't know how everyone else has found I/O psychology. I might be one of the rare situations where I actually found I/O in high school. So it was from an early start, which I don't find as common, but maybe it's a growing situation for some folks. So from the time I started my BS at Illinois Tech, I knew that I really enjoyed I/O, and that's kind of what I wanted to pursue. And then got my MS on the way to during my Ph.D. program. So it was a dual degree track. Fun facts: love running, love coffee, love escape rooms. I also tap dance. It's a fun hobby of mine. And then I always include this with students, but I think it's just fun. My first job ever was working as a sample person at Burkott Superfood. So I used to hand out samples for fun. And then I currently work at Lenovo as a senior leadership and organization development specialist. So we've all had career journeys. Sometimes you start out handing out food, and that's totally cool. Though not my dream job, I would say. So a little bit about my journey in I/O. So I mentioned I got my BS in psychology. I did do a brief study abroad in Ireland. I will say having global experience really helps me land a job at Lenovo. If you can get any type of global experience at all, that's something that's personally helped me and I think was good for professional growth and development as well, or personal growth and development rather. During my time of my graduate degree, I had various STEM jobs, promoting STEM and helping students work through what they want to do in STEM careers is something I'm passionate about, kind of on the side and simultaneously still. So I worked with a lot of high school students during my graduate school career. I also did research at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago. During my graduate school time, I did research on competency modeling for healthcare leadership. And then I took that work into the National Center for Healthcare Leadership, where I program managed something called the Leadership Excellence Networks. It was a conglomerate of hospitals and health systems across the country that got together to share best practices related to talent management, people analytics, et cetera. And I program managed that, which was a great experience, really helped build my network. Pandemic hit, I graduated with my MS in 2020, did some online teaching while I was finishing my PhD. And then on a whim, my husband and I moved to North Carolina. We were in the middle of the pandemic. My parents were relocating and we were like, we're working remotely anyway. My advisor was okay with me working remotely. I said, why not move out to NC? And I've been in the Research Triangle area ever since. And I found Lenovo second. A lot of people think that I moved for Lenovo, but I actually found Lenovo because it was 5 minutes down the road from my first apartment. So I don't have any amazing advice there, except to say sometimes things just happen when they're meant to be in life. There was no actually networking involved in the Lenovo job. I just happened to pass them on the way to work or not on the way to work, just going to the store. And then I had an Uber driver say that she worked for Lenovo and she Ubered on the side. And she's like, it's a great place to work. You should apply. So sometimes things just align there. But work at Lenovo now in our org development department, officially defended my PhD in 2023. And then I've just kind of been figuring out ways to contribute to the I/O field ever since during my work at Lenovo. A little bit about what I do today, because I think that's maybe the most relevant and interesting stuff I work on. I work for Lenovo's org development team. We're really more of a talent management function more than anything. So we oversee a lot of strategic human resource projects. The ones that I work on currently are our employee engagement survey, our performance management process, and then also our skills-enabled talent management journey. So this is kind of like a trend going on in the market right now. How are we going to enable our organizations with skills? And it's really a big challenge that I/Os can take on pretty well. So I've been focused on how can we identify and measure skills for all of our employees across Lenovo so we can inform development, hiring, recruitment, different things like that on the basis of skills. So that's kind of what I do today. It's been fun, exciting. Those are some photos. Lenovo does a lot of in our local community. Recently, the PNC Arena was renamed the Lenovo Center. So I got to go to the grand opening for that, which was fun. See our CEO, YY, over here who visited us in office. Me and my colleague at MSIOP. My team presented at the APA. And then the middle photo is from Beijing. I got to go to our China headquarters last year, which was really cool. A list of things that have helped me in my career so far. So networking is very important. I said I didn't get my job at Lenovo through networking, but there have been plenty of other points in my career where networking has helped me either with publications and presentations or internships during my time in graduate school. Another thing is job crafting. This one's a recent learning for me. So I think I realized at some point that the perfect job maybe doesn't always exist, but you can make it what you want it to be. So in addition to all the things that I do at Lenovo, I'm often trying to find ways to present and teach, volunteer, and do other things I love and enjoy that aren't necessarily fulfilled in my day-to-day job description, but are things I could do outside of work. Or Lenovo has just been really gracious with letting me do the things that I enjoy and volunteering my time to do so. Staying informed is another thing that's helped me kind of differentiate myself in my career. I listen to a lot of NPR, a lot of Wall Street Journal, and having the business mindset when talking to stakeholders has actually been quite useful for me. So I would say the more you can listen to podcasts to stay informed or read, the better. Always ask questions. And I mean that in not just always stay curious, but from like a consulting lens too, before you jump in with your I/O knowledge. Not everyone's coming from the same place we are. So the more you're curious about their perspective, the better your relationships are going to be. And raising your hand there. So I have a tendency to over volunteer myself for my time. Maybe that's my personality, but I will say that raising my hand to volunteer for things has been more of a benefit than a detriment most times in my life. And so I would just say the more you could be like Brianna here and raising your hand to coordinate panels, or and Hanna here too, or do anything of that nature, the more it's going to build your career now and down the line. I mean, you never know when a relationship might not pay off in the short term, but in the long term, it might be. Just the other day, I had a colleague I went to undergrad with reach out to me, and I referred him for a job. And I just remember that relationship was so strong at the time that I met him. I know him as a great person. It's 10 years later, but that connection from back then is something that maintained through now in my memory of him. So you never know who you meet and how it's going to be important down the line. And so raise your hand to do things, meet other people. It's definitely been beneficial to my career. And thanks. I'll keep this slide up really quickly. I don't know how many students are on the call, but at some point I presented to someone on how I've used classwork in practice. And so here are some classes that I've taken and the things that I've applied in my actual job. It's a common question I get of how do I actually apply I/O in everyday work? And I saw, Emi, you had kind of a slide on that too. So I figured I'd bring that up as well. But thank you for your time. And I think I'll turn it on over to Kristen.
Awesome. I'm going to share some slides as well. Let's see. Awesome. Well, it's been great hearing from the two of you and your different perspectives and journeys. So I'm excited to close this out by sharing how I've applied I/O psychology in leadership development, specifically in the context of higher education. As mentioned, my name is Kristen Finley. I work as a talent and development specialist at Clemson University. And while my day-to-day is grounded in coaching and program design, it's very much a form of applied organizational development. So I figured I would also start with my path into industrial organizational psychology. And initially, I just knew that I wanted to be a therapist. And after graduation, I worked really briefly as an addictions counselor. And when I say briefly, I do mean briefly. It lasted all of 3 months for me. While that work was really meaningful, I quickly realized that it was not going to be sustainable for me over the long term. But at the same time, I was working a second job in the nonprofit sector where I was really supporting program development and data analysis and collection. And I remember realizing almost accidentally that I was drawing a lot on my psych background. I found myself asking questions like, what motivates this team and how can we structure the work we do to create the most impact? And I noticed that I was really energized by that work, and it triggered this memory I had of one of my undergrad professors just mentioning I/O psychology really briefly and in passing. So I took that as a hint and I explored it a little more. I really liked what I learned and I started applying to graduate programs. And making that career shift really gave me the language, the structure, and the confidence that I needed to lean into what I was kind of already doing intuitively, but to be more intentional in that application. So eventually, I pivoted out of nonprofit and landed in human resources within the context of higher ed. That's where I'm at now. And in my current role, I primarily oversee CU Grow, which is a professional development program for our university staff. And in the program, we combine coaching, mentoring, and project-based learning to really help our participants grow both personally and professionally. And I think it's important to note that in this work, we do a lot of work around change management and strategic thinking and individualized coaching. So while it is sometimes more in that talent development space, through that individual work that we're doing with each person, we are making strides towards organizational strategy where we're hoping to improve retention, improve employee engagement, and we're creating and designing opportunities that are aligned with best practices in I/O psychology that tap into these ideas of adult learning principles and motivational theories to make the experience impactful and help us achieve those goals. In addition to managing CU Grow, I also utilize behavioral assessments and individual coaching for our staff. I facilitate trainings and team building workshops around topics like communication and leadership styles. And I consult on program design, both internally and externally. So I can really speak to those I-O principles that are foundational to the work that we do. I, too, included a chart that exemplifies how we apply theory, what we've learned in our I-O programs, to what we do in our day-to-day. And I think the most important point that I'd like to make here is that industrial organizational psychology provides us with really helpful tools to bring about individual and organizational change. But more than that, it prompts this way of thinking where we're able to pause, assess the situation, and strategize ways to effectively bring about change. So more than anything, it's that thought practice that I have found very helpful throughout my career. And just a few key takeaways that I've learned and reflected on during my time in this discipline. First, this field is really adaptable. You don't have to necessarily be in a consulting role or a teaching role to make an impact, because the principles lend themselves to real world change. Whether you are designing programs or facilitating trainings or helping organizations restructure and navigate change, the core principles of I-O can be used in so many different environments, whether that's corporate or nonprofit, government sectors. It's applicable. And I found that it gives us the language to talk about growth in a way that's grounded in strategy and in personal development. It's more than just asking, okay, well, how did this person improve their performance? It's really digging into the issue more deeply to ask more thoughtful questions like, well, what support did they need, and what obstacles were in place, and what made this growth, this opportunity meaningful and sustainable. And because of that, I think that leadership development is really where I-O shines, especially when we treat it as a way to align personal growth with organizational strategy. In my work, I hear leaders say that development is often a nice to have and not necessarily a need to have, but it's actually key to organizational performance and retention. And when we support people in showing up fully and leading authentically, we're not just changing their individual experience, but we're also changing the culture of the organizations that we work in. And that leads me to my last point. For me, I-O psychology is a way to live out two things that I care really deeply about. First, helping people grow, and then second, helping systems evolve. And that work isn't always glamorous, but it is impactful because it allows us to create environments where people can thrive. So that was a little more brief than I anticipated. I'm having some network issues and it threw me off my game, but I'm really happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you to all of our speakers again, just for sharing your experiences and offering such great advice. And at least for now, we'll go ahead and open up the floor for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask away.
Hello, I have a question. What would you suggest? Do you have any advice for early career professionals in the I-O field?
I'll take this first. I saw us nodding. So it sounds like, or it looks like anyway, everyone's got that. But I think Melanie alluded to this earlier. I think networking is really, really helpful. I think one of the things that I didn't do initially when I got into the I-O sphere is things like this, right? Where I could even understand how I could apply it, or the wide array of applicability of that particular degree or education in general. So I would say networking as an early career professional or student or someone who's newly graduated. I think in that networking setting, I'm just being very intentional about listening to what is the applicability, what are the things you're interested in, There's really such a wide breadth of things that you can do. And I just really encourage, I think my first year of networking was a lot of listening and just hearing how people applied it and the things that were possible. And then maybe narrowing it down to your areas of interest and then doing some specialized networking as well. That's kind of my step one. Mine is leadership specifically that I've really gotten interested in. And so I think that's a really great first step is to just get yourself out there and then get your name and face out there too. And people will be interested in hearing where your interest lies as well.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. So I'm a recent graduate in I/O psychology, and I'm very much interested in OD. I'm currently doing an internship in OD, but I was told that it is really difficult to break into OD, as an early career, person. So I've been advised by people to either go in as a learning and development, person or, something in HR or things like that. What are your, recommendations for the best way to, break into OD, especially for somebody that is new to the field of I/O psychology, because this is I was in a completely different field and I'm really new to all of this. So what would you recommend as, the best path or the recommended path moving forward?
That's a good question. So I am in a situation where I did start off my early career in OD. So a little bit different. What I will say is that our current team, I have seen people come to our team from different departments, as you're saying. So someone from L&D, someone from comp, someone even from like a talent acquisition administrative role into OD. So I would say directionally, I think that's good advice. If you can't get a job initially in OD, I've personally seen where other people have come onto your team from different parts of HR. But from personal experience, I think it is possible, especially if you have an internship in OD. I think you have to look for companies that are willing to hire early career talent into those types of positions. That's my experience. I'm sure others have different experiences as well.
Thank you.
I'll maybe also just share that you may find yourself in a role where you can apply it and then gain the experience to put on your resume, right? And then that can be the focal point of maybe the next step in your career, right? So maybe in a non-traditional role, taking that and then redesigning the verbiage later to say, this is how I used OD in, for me, project management, right? So having that be the focal point of whatever the role is you find yourself. And I think one of my panelists earlier was talking about how they use that too in that sense. Doesn't have to necessarily be the title that you're looking for, but it absolutely can be the principles you're using at play to keep that foundation and put it there later.
Awesome. Thank you.
I would agree. And I would also say networking is going to be really important in that regard too, because yes, you need to develop the skills in the role that you're able to obtain, but by building those relationships, it can connect you with different opportunities that will come later and help you continue to expand your skill set.
So much.
Rebecca, you have your hand raised.
Thanks. This was really interesting. One of the things, so I'm going to even take a step back from Petra's question. And one of the things I'm trying to figure out is really what OD is. And I missed the first few minutes if you defined it then, but it seems like from the work that you're doing, a lot of it is either leadership development or leadership coaching or maybe more closer to like strategic talent management or things like that. So in your words, like how do you define OD and what that means for your day-to-day tasks?
Okay, I can take a stab at this to begin. I will say, as someone earlier in their career, I have had people senior to me tell me that at Lenovo, how we define OD is not how other companies define OD. So I'll define in the context of what Lenovo is, but I know that there's different companies that do different OD work. So essentially what we do is strategic HR processes. So anything that touches the entirety of employees at Lenovo and how we're going to improve the employee life cycle as a whole. So end-to-end processes from succession planning to performance management. We're a little unique in that we also own the employee survey, but we own a lot of processes that touch the entire organization, and we're involved in how we can inform people strategy for Lenovo.
I would say it's similar. That is similar to how we do it at Clemson because our organizational development team is housed in HR. So we tend to, by default, lean more on that people strategy. But looking big picture, it is how we enhance the effectiveness of the organization through the personnel. So that's why talent development, leadership development, personnel planning tend to fall under that subset of I/O Psych.
I think the word I'm going to kind of tag on to, or the words that I'm going to tag on to that Kristen said were organizational effectiveness, right? So in my particular context, my focus would more be probably on change, or in the agile development, we do what's called CI, continuous improvement, right? But what are the structures and the systems and processes in place where we are continually evolving, adapting, and making the organization or, teams within the organization with the hope of improving the organization? How do we keep making that better in some way? And there are so many different frameworks and processes you can use for that. But I think that to me would be the response there is how do we continually adapt our organizational structures, processes, people, behaviors, right, to make the org the most effective to achieve the outcome of whatever the org is, because every org exists for a purpose, hopefully.
Amon, you have your hand raised if you want to unmute.
Yeah, hi. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to you all for coming together and sharing your experience in this field, because we definitely hear a lot of point of views and how to get there. And so the more exposure we hear, the better it is for us to be prepared. Um, I have a question. It could be a two-part thing. Just a little bit of a background. I just applied to go into master's in I/O psychology, and we'll start this fall. I'm doing what I can to be prepared for our schooling, and I'm wondering what it is in your academic field that led you to where you are today that you feel like you're using every day, all the time in your line of work, and what it is that I could do as soon as I start my academic journey to make the most out of my experience to graduate and be able to get my foot in the door.
That's a really great question, and congratulations on your admittance into grad school. That's very exciting. I would encourage you to use every learning experience and opportunity to somehow make a connection back to the real world. As you're reading your textbooks, as you are completing assignments, figure out, okay, what is this going to look like if I apply it in my work? And similar to what we said earlier, I would encourage you to develop your communication skills so you can speak to that strategy piece, but in a way that's going to be relatable when it comes time for you to find a job. Because sometimes we get really bogged down in the jargon of the fields, but we need to be able to speak to how it's applicable to a variety of contexts and organizations.
I kind of wanted to touch on the first part of the question that you asked there, which is kind of the interest area. So almost the opposite of Kristen, I got into psychology and I had a professor who loved me and I loved his class. And he was like, you should go into clinical psychology. And I thought, absolutely not. And so I knew that there was something about psychology I really loved and was really inspired by. And it's the people, right? The human-centric leadership side of the work that I do now is all about the people, the human, the hearth is what it's called, the model. But hearth is a warming zone of antiquity, and that's really the lifeblood of the home, and where people gather and get together. And so that's what I consider the people of an org. And so it really was a passion for people and a desire to not move into kind of your clinical or counseling psychology realm that really led me to the I/O space. And what I would really also kind of encourage is for you to find what those passion things are for you, because if you aren't passionate about whatever it is you're doing in the IO space, it's not going to feel natural. It's not going to feel exciting to go to work every day. It's not going to feel exciting to find what your niche area is. And there are so many. So maybe just giving a little bit of honor to the things that you're passionate about, whether it's people or processes or projects or whatever it is that really fires your heart up. Give some honor to that, and then kind of see where it can plug in with some of those things, because you're going to find that there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. And so I found that the passion part of me was super fired up about leadership, and so that's really the direction I've gone.
What Kristen and Emi said definitely resonate with me for sure. The first thing that came to my mind is the first thing Kristen said, which is figure out the application pieces of what you're studying. There were so many times where, like, I had luckily work, even if the work wasn't an internship directly in IO, if I had some way to apply the concepts I was learning, I would take the opportunity to try and do that. So I think in my presentation, I mentioned I did like high school STEM job. It was more program management, but I thought about, okay, how can I apply leadership principles to help develop these students, right? So the job wasn't an IO role, but I was thinking about how I could apply my classwork to that situation. So absolutely agree with that. The more you can apply, the better. And then definitely follow your passions and be open to new passions too. I will say my thesis and dissertation work is on leadership and diversity and gender differences. And I now work in org development, completely different switch, but I also love that work. So did not expect myself to end up in this space, but I am now, and I really love it. So be open to that too.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.
Okay, hi guys, I'm Kezia. I am also an incoming student into a master's I-O program this fall. And my question was more so, it's kind of similar to the other questions that we heard. It's about how to build skills. Like, of course, there's the academic side of IO and like learning the theories and principles. But aside from like internships, which like I plan to start an IO internship this fall as well, is there like any value in like studying and earning certifications through Google or LinkedIn, or like what would be other ways to build skills that I could practice using to prepare myself for the workforce upon graduation later on?
You can volunteer. I personally, I'm really engaged in MSIOP, the I-O psychology organization. I volunteer for committees. So that I would say less, maybe that's less skill building and more I continue to learn what other people are doing and sharing ideas. And I think the type of networking where you're exchanging ideas and concepts is, I think, good for your development in general, or anyone's development. So I would say that I don't think I have a couple certifications through like assessments, but I wouldn't say those are through companies I've worked for who have allowed me to gain those certifications. So I don't think any of the things I've been certified in have given me a cutting edge, but it's never a bad thing. I will say the more you learn about AI right now, the better. Just not necessarily being like a complete expert in AI, but being able to critically think through how you can apply it from a data perspective is really important. I've seen that give me kind of a cutting edge in my work right now, because I understand at a basic foundation how AI's works and how I have enough skepticism to actually understand how it can contribute meaningfully to roles at Lenovo versus just broadly thinking AI is a good idea, or like things like that. The more you can learn about AI, I think the better as it evolves.
Hi, Melanie. I have a really similar experience. The organizations I've worked at have paid for me to get certifications in different assessments. And I think this answer also varies a little bit based off of your area of expertise within the world of IO. So you might want to explore instructional design or coaching practices, but it might look a little bit different if you work on more of a high-level strategy side. Maybe it is that continuous improvement or project management certification, things that will allow you to put language around what the transferable skills are, and help you to hone in where you have that area of interest.
Kind of is similar in that vein. I think Melanie alluded to MSIOP there as well, but there are even some niche organizations. If you're interested in leadership, I am a member of like International Leadership Association as an example, right? So there are student memberships out there, and usually they're pretty affordable for areas that you're really interested in or you're interested in gaining skills. Maybe not necessarily practicing, but even learning. Oftentimes there's webinars that you have access to as a student member, or you might have the ability to interact in some sort of a workshop, or just things where you can practice a specific type of skill set through your membership in a specific area. I think coaching was mentioned as well. They have organizations as well out there that do coaching, memberships for students. And so it may be something to explore, because often those memberships are very affordable for students, and then you can gain access to all of the cool things that they do out in the world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you guys so much for your input.
Thanks everyone for your presentations. Quick question. What did your graduate education not prepare you for? Or if that sounds too harsh, what surprised you in terms of how the rubber meets the road?
I think for me, I was really surprised at how little people care about theory and science. Like in the world of business, really, people care about the ROI. What's the bottom line? Why should we do this? Why should we not? So being able to make a case for effective strategies that are evidence-based is going to have to be tied back to the dollars in some way. So you have to get kind of creative in how you present your case and how you advocate for your work, because it is important, but sometimes you have to work a little harder to make people see how important it really is.
I think for me, understanding what the next steps were going to look like, right? So I will say I love Regent University, Regent Royals, whoop whoop, but they really did, I think, a lot more on the doctoral side than maybe the master side. And after masters, it was kind of like hands off. You're on your own, go figure it out. And so there was a huge learning curve of what the applicability is, and having environments like this. So thank you, Brianna, again, for having moments like this where you can learn from other professionals and really understand what to do next. I think that, I had this toolkit of all this information, and I'm ready with my little suitcase to go use it, and I had no idea how. And so I think just taking those intentional steps, really kind of at the end even of a master's or a doctoral program, to really understand what that next step is going to look like, and doing it while you're still a student, maybe, and you're, in your last stages there, is what my program at the master's level didn't necessarily prepare me for. I will say Regent did a much better job on that end, or on that front, for sure.
And I would reinforce the business piece. I think I was told no one would care about the theory. I don't think I quite believe the extent to it, for sure. The being able to build a business case for your work is so important. So figuring out how to simplify your language enough to communicate concepts that are I/O related, but maybe underneath. I do a lot of work where I know underneath it's I/O work, but at a business level, that's not what people need to know, right? So I've gotten used to like trusting that I'm doing the quality I/O work underneath, but I can communicate those concepts differently to sell what I'm working on. And I think that's been very important. So reinforcing what Kristen said to start, for sure. You almost never use the term I/O. I see Emi put that in the chat. Yeah, it depends on the situation for me, for sure. I/O is not as recognized, for sure, as a field. So I would say that. I had another one and I forget what it was. Oh, I was told in undergrad, I had a professor who was really, really harsh. And I always come back to this, so I'll share it. he always said, so what, who cares? And every time I work on something, I think to myself, so what, who cares? Because he was harsh and no one really liked him that much for it. But I think of that every time I'm working on a project, like, so what am I doing this? Why would anyone care? That is how I build business cases. So I just about that.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This is like so refreshing to hear from other I/O professionals. I am a recent graduate, finished my PhD back in December. So I'm in the job market right now. I'm doing some contract work, but looking for a full-time role and, just attending so many networking events and really putting myself out there. And one thing I really struggle with is how to introduce myself whenever I explain my title, because, whenever you do say I'm an I/O professional, you get like a whole like, oh, kind of phase, even if it's people with an HR background. So I never know what's the best way to do my elevator pitch, without having people lose interest and really be clear about what my skill set is in, like a really brief amount of time. So I would love to hear the perspective on that, on like what's the best way to kind of introduce yourself when you are kind of in that beginner space. So yeah, thank you.
I can share a little bit there because I did make a cheeky comment in the chat, but I absolutely do that. So because I work in technology, I'll tell you, negative people often that I encounter in the technology sector know what I/O is going into the conversation. And so less using the term I/O when I interact with people is really the area of specialization. So you maybe want to think about using whatever common language, particularly in the setting that you're in, right? What is the common language that you can really align with folks on and intersect with them in that pitch? And I have a couple of different what I would call quote unquote elevator pitches. I actually really don't like them because they feel very inauthentic to me. But I do have different conversation points that I might bring depending on the context. And so what is your area of specialty? And then what common language could you really use with anyone? And maybe thinking about it from a more holistic or universal perspective of how you can speak to that specialization versus the more general umbrella of I/O and say, hey, this is really where I did my studies, or this is really where I have an area of expertise, and then letting that be the focal point in an environment where people don't know where I/O is. And you'll probably be able to kind of tell over time which environments know what I/O is, which is often the I/O community, and then who doesn't know what I/O is.
Thank you.
I don't know if I have any adds to that. I was lucky enough to be hired by someone who had an I/O background and degree. So I think Emi's advice is going to go far beyond anything I could offer. What I will say to yourself and other people on the call, once you're in a role, I have gone lengths in my current company to introduce I/O to other people, to introduce it to our TA and recruiting team. So I don't have any advice to offer you right now in terms of positioning. What I will say is that I think as I/Os with a little known field, the more you can communicate with people internally when you're eventually in a role about what you do and who you are and why I/Os are so great, the more you kind of build that. I was one of two I/Os when I started, and now I think I've counted like 7 since I started, because I'm constantly referring people, telling people about other people, why I/O is so cool. So I would just reinforce that we should all be excited about our field as well once you're in the space and have the opportunity to share. But I'm going to reinforce what Emi said, because she has a better response about your actual question.
No, thank you. And I was just accepted into MSIOP, so I look forward to connecting with other I/O professionals in that setting.
That's great. I think the only thing I would add to Emi's response is really around that piece, that point that she made about talking points that you want to bring up as you introduce yourself. And I find it helpful to think about, okay, how do I want this person to reach out and connect with me? What am I communicating my expertise as? What do I want to be known for? So I kind of lead with that and then let the rest follow.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I know we're running a little low on time, so I'll try to keep it brief. I wanted to ask Melanie about you mentioned not your current role, but what you did in grad school is working with like leadership development, specifically in healthcare. Extremely specific to me because I'm currently interning at a massive hospital, and we are doing a ton of leadership development. So maybe your general take on I/O in the healthcare field too, because coming into like the master's program and everything I'm in, I'd only really heard about like consulting and business. I'd never considered healthcare to be like a place where an IO could thrive. But now starting my like internship, I'm like, there's a lot of IO work to be done. So I want to know your perspective on it.
Oh, there's so much IO work to be done. And, I think I would have stayed in healthcare if it wasn't for Lenovo offering me the job. I was looking for healthcare roles at the time and I wanted to stay. I created with some colleagues of mine an IO psychology healthcare network because there were like, it might still exist. I'll have to look it up and send it to you. But there were people who were taking on big challenges as IOs because at the end of the day in healthcare, the output is a patient's life. So I personally find that the work I did in the healthcare space was the most rewarding in terms of what I've done in IO because there's such the gravitas of the outcome is so big, right? But there's also plenty of hospital and healthcare systems that are doing incredible research in the leadership and team space. The entire field of health systems management is like not IOs per se, but just like people who are focused on how do we manage health systems well is basically the field. And so I used to collaborate with a lot of academics in that space and they welcomed IO perspective. So I would just put out there, I think IOs have so much to give to the healthcare space and it's so important because of what's at stake and on the line. If you're interested in places that do like really great IO work, I would say MD Anderson has a phenomenal leadership institute with IOs. Maybe that's where you work, I'm not sure. But and then another one, I think Intermountain Healthcare has some really great work. And several other places where I used to work, the National Center for Healthcare Leadership also puts out a lot of research around benchmarking, leadership development programs, competency modeling. So happy to talk more about that. I could talk about this all day though. It's really where my passions lie. If it wasn't for like finding Lenovo first before a healthcare job, but it's huge. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
And I did put it in the chat for you, but I'll just mention it. The International Leadership Association does have a healthcare leadership community within that. If you're ever looking for memberships, I guess technically that is the space I'm in right now, is business intelligence for healthcare. So I was interested in it more from learning the actual healthcare side of it and not necessarily the analytics. But that community is really amazing community of members that actually do leadership as healthcare, providers. So.
Thank you all for speaking. It was really insightful. I do appreciate it. My question is kind of similar in a way to Kale's, mainly just because for me personally, I do have that passion to work more corporate for beauty industries or wellness brands as well. And I was just wondering what your take is on having that tunnel vision and looking for or working for companies within that industry, or is it better to expand and work in different industries like healthcare or tech, even though like my North Star might be the beauty services or is, which do you find more advantageous?
I feel like it's picking up on the last question, so I can start. I That's a tough one. It's a tough job market out there too, right? I think we need to acknowledge that I ultimately ended up where I did because no one in healthcare was picking up my resume. So it ended up being a matter of I got lucky landing an interview with Lenovo and getting through the process, and I'm grateful to be in tech today. I I do feel like personally, I could see my career being a North Star back into healthcare or somewhere else, just because that's where my passions lie. And I feel like where you're driven to make a contribution, right? At the end of the day, tech has given me a great opportunity because there's so much money and investment in some of the IO areas that maybe other places don't have as much contributions into. So I get to learn a lot, but you know, our mission is related to technology, products, and people. It's not related to like the health of society. And so the meaning is less there. But I think I just have to acknowledge that I'm here because I wanted a new position, a new job. I was lucky to get it. And hopefully, if I find myself back in where I really want to be one day, that would be great. For now, I think the experience of being in a global Fortune 500 company like Lenovo is an excellent experience that will help improve wherever I go back to one day.
Keep that thought. I think it's important to know what your North Star is and to be really intentional about gaining education and experiences that are going to equip you to meet that opportunity when it does arise. You never know when that's going to be. So, to Melanie's point, figure out how you can still do the work, develop the skills while setting yourself up to eventually fulfill that goal.
I guess the last thing I'll kind of add, the last time I ever really looked out in the job market for job roles, I kind of had to start drawing the lines myself. Like, hey, here's something that's IO that I can really map to. Here's something, and that can literally be any industry, any role. Organizations need to be effective, regardless of what the industry is, regardless of what the market is looking like. Right, their job is to respond and be effective in any environment. And so whether you're in the field of beauty, whether you're in healthcare, technology, education, right? So I think we've explored a lot of different contexts today. I think what a really big value add is for you to be able to start drawing those lines to that. And I think any industry that you're in, I don't think one is better than the other, right? To say, okay, my title says this or my role says this. You can really map back and forth, bidirectionally, I think, with the skills that you have underlined and what you're doing in your day to day. So I wouldn't say one's better than the other, but I definitely would say you can find all of those elements that you're using regardless of the industry, because everyone's goal in that organization is to be the most effective them, whether you're delivering pizza for Pizza Hut or whatever it is, right? Like, yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. So kind of taking that perspective might be helpful.
Thank you.
Hi. First, thank you all so much for sharing your background and insight. It's much appreciated. My question is very related to earlier questions about breaking into the field. I graduated with my master's in IO a little over a year ago, and over the past year, I've been working more so in like HR operations and employee life cycle, which of course has value, but I haven't had as much hands-on experience in the development side as I had anticipated. So, from your experience, what is something that individuals can do independently to help build those knowledge and skills to help them eventually land that position where they can thrive in org development or talent development?
I, in my work, deal with a lot of people who are looking to make pivots similar to yourself. Sometimes the context is a little different, but the principle still applies. And it's all about, one, having a conversation. I think supervisors don't always know where our interests lie. And when you're able to communicate what you're hoping for, they may be able to plug you into strategic projects that you wouldn't otherwise know about that are going to help you gain some of that experience. But you can also take your own development in your hands. You can continue to listen to webinars, network with people, see if there are volunteer opportunities. We've talked about joining professional associations and organizations. Tap into resources that are going to help you refine that skill set and network with people who can share their expertise and their insight.
I'll touch on this because I think I've heard both my co-panelists mention it, but maybe not necessarily in this context as robustly, but the volunteering thing and what that can look like. I know that people don't love to work not paid, right? So if you really take that blinder off of like, like it's unpaid work and put on the lens of volunteering, right, and offering those services. Going back to people who have already helped you in some way in your career. So I had a personal trainer who like helped me get to my fittest self years and years ago, but also he did some just really cool things in the community. And a decade later, I got to go back and help him figure out how he was going to take his gym to a digital way, because now the digital platforms are needed everywhere, and he had never had a digital presence. And helping him understand his services as products and just doing some cool volunteer work. And now that's something that I have as a project on my resume that I have, kind of helped take that from ideation into this like much more robust digital offering that was going to really help him move into the next level for his organization as professional trainer. And so I think it's really just identifying some additional opportunities. I mean, you mentioned personally, right? So not necessarily within the context of your work, but personally, finding opportunities like that where you might be able to maybe pay it forward to someone who's already helped you and kind of reach back out, or figuring out other opportunities that are out there within your communities or within nonprofit organizations. I mean, they're always looking for help of some kind, and if you offer a very specialized or niche help to a nonprofit that's really meaningful to your heart, that's something that may be an opportunity as well to plug in, to offer a service, and then also gain the experience right at the same time.
All right, great. Thank you so much for your insight. I very much appreciate it.
Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap up? Okay. Oh, okay. I thought someone sent one in the chat. All right. Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate all of your attendance and participation. And also, of course, thank you to our speakers. You have been so wonderful and insightful, and we really do appreciate it. We're going to hold these sessions on Monday nights, basically from here on to into probably October. It won't be every Monday, but they'll all go on LinkedIn. All of the events will be posted. We have a bunch of different topics within I/O with a lot of different professionals. I know some of the audience for this one will actually be some of the speakers in the next ones. So just keep an eye out on my LinkedIn, and everyone, please feel free to connect with each other, and we'll just kind of grow our network from here.